In this video, we will try to build an auto prompt generator service where you can give your raw prompt and it would be able to give you well-crafted prompt which any model can understand. We are going to test it out with OpenAI models and we are also going to test it out with open source model. And to achieve this, we are going to refer the prompt generation guide from OpenAI. So OpenAI has recently introduced a generate button in their playground which lets you generate prompt, function and schema just based on the description of your task. And as they have also noticed, creating prompts and schema from scratch can be time consuming. So generating them can help you get started quickly. In this case, they are utilizing the meta prompt. They have also mentioned in future they can integrate it with DSP and gradient descent, which is another prompt optimization technique. So these techniques would help you to generate prompts automatically. You can see a meta prompt instruct a model to create a good prompt based on your task description or improve an existing one. If you want to see how this meta prompt looks like, so you can see the specific instruction which they had given over here, like what exactly need to pass in the meta prompt, and then you can call this meta prompt with any of the models. So we are going to utilize this meta prompt. We can build a service around it because this is already here in the documentation. This is for generating a prompt. Similar documentation we can find for generating structured output and function schema. So in this case, you can see how they have defined the prompts over here. First, actually they have defined the meta schema, and then this meta schema they are referring in this meta prompt to generate a structured output. And same thing we can do with function schema also. Here also you are going to have a meta schema, and then at the bottom you are going to have a meta prompt. If you want to see all this in action, then they have already enabled it in their playground. You can see in the system instruction you will see this star icon. We just have to click on this, and then here I can pass some instruction. Based on my instruction, it will try to generate a system prompt. Let me just pass some random instruction. So I will just say identify the PII formation in the given input and also flag it. So I have just passed one line instruction over here, and I'm just going to click on create, and you can see it's taking its time. So you can see it has generated a very well detailed and crafted prompt based on the meta prompt guide. And then you can see specific instruction over here. You should identify all PII elements such as name, address, phone number, email addresses, social security number, credit card details and other sensitive information. And all this I haven't passed it. It's just that like model was capable enough to come with all this filter criteria. Clearly mark or flag any text considered to be PII for easy recognition. And then what are the categories it has to identify? Name, address, phone number, email, social security and other sensitive information. What is going to be output format for this? So the response should be in the JSON format with the detailed identification of the PII found, original text, PII identified, value start, end index, and then flag text. And then there are some examples also. John Smith lives at this particular address, his phone number is this. Output is going to be like your original text is going to be this one, PII identified, full name, John Smith, start and index. Then you do have the addresses over here, the phone number and the flag text. And at the last we are going to have some notes. Now what if you want to expose it as an API so that you can integrate it with other applications? So what we are going to do, we are going to go to our Visual Studio, and first thing what we have to create is this prompts.py. In this case what we are doing, like we are just taking all this prompt from the documentation what we have seen so far. So as we have seen in meta prompt, we have just taken all this and just pasted it in our code, calling it as meta prompt. Similarly, we have seen, okay, there is something for structured output. We have just captured it. Structured output meta prompt. We have done that. Function meta schema and the function meta prompt. So this would be our first step where actually we have to take all the instruction which model is passing to generate all this meta prompt, and then we'll just keep it separately in the prompts.py file. So after that, we are going to create this utils.py file. We are going to initialize our client using OpenAI models, and we have to take all the instructions what we have seen in prompts.py. So we are just importing everything from there, and then we just have to pass all this inside of functions like what we have seen in the documentation. So this is going to be your function where it's going to take a task or prompt as a string. This is for our input, and then after that you can use any of the model because in the documentation there was GPT-4 GPT-4o. So I'm going ahead with the GPT-4o. You can try with GPT-4o mini also, or any of the models. So we have to pass all this prompt under a content role as a system, and then under user we just have to pass all this instruction what we are getting. So this function is also exact replica of what we have seen over here. You can just take this and then put it into your code. And similarly we can do it for structured output schema generation, and similarly we can do it for function schema generation as well. In schema we do have this kind of functions. We have just taken it and pasted in our code. Similarly we do have for structured output schema also, so we can just take it and put it in our code. So now we are going to have three functions defined in this case. First is going to be for prompt generation, second is going to be for structured output generation, and third is going to be function schema generation. Now once we have our meta prompt and function has been defined, we just have to expose it as an endpoint. To expose as an endpoint, we are using this FastAPI. So FastAPI is coming from here, you can see it importing, and we know like FastAPI works on the Pydantic. So from Pydantic we have to import base model as well, and here we have to define how our input is going to be processed. We have defined a class item and the input should be in the form of a string. We have to import base model over here, and because we want to utilize the FastAPI, then first of all we have to initialize it, and after that we just have to create our endpoint, and here we have created an endpoint autoprompt, and then we just have to define our functions. Under functions we have to pass this as an input. So input is going to come from item.input. So this input is something that we have to pass it to our endpoint to generate a prompt. Similarly we have created another endpoint which is going to be autoprompt schema, and then we are going to have autoprompt function schema. So the code is going to be same. We are just calling whatever functions we have defined, and we are just returning the output. Output is going to come like response output. So we can go ahead and try to run this code now. So for that we are going to run uvcon main app reload. You can see it's running over here. So I mean in my postman, so we have to go to body just to pass our instruction, and then we have to select raw, and here the input is going to be JSON. So because we have defined input as a parameter to pass to this particular endpoint, so we have to just make sure like our key is going to be input when we are passing any instruction to the model, and then I can pass any raw instruction. I will just try to pass the same, identify the PII information in the given input and flag it. So I will go ahead and hit this endpoint, and you can see we have got the output. Here you could see the output is not in the readable format, and this is happening because we are trying to print it as a JSON over here, and it is trying to preserve all the markdown what are there in the output. So there are two ways to handle it. So one thing would be like we can just go ahead and try to print the output on the console only. In that case you can see the output is going to come pretty well. Application startup complete. So I would just go ahead and hit this endpoint once more. Again you can see we are getting all this /n's, but in this case you can see it's coming as expected, like how we were getting it in the system prompt. So we could see a lot of new lines in this particular text, and in the JSON it is just trying to preserve it. Second thing what we can do, like when we are going to expose it for the consumers, and when the consumer is going to consume it, they can get the data in the correct format. Just to show you what I did, I had created one consumer application. So in this case we are just passing our URL, and our input is going to be this. So I can just take this particular input, and then we just have to call this particular endpoint using request.post. We just have to pass the URL and the input what we are passing over here. Once we have got a successful code, we are just going to get the data from here. We know our output is going to come under this response key. So anyone who is consuming your application, they can just pass a key from here, and they can retrieve the output and print the output. Our endpoint is up and running. So let me just go ahead and try to run this so that you can see it in action, and you can see like we are able to get the output. In this case, the output is coming as expected. So this is how you can expose your API and then ask your consumer to consume it, so that they can get the well-crafted prompt just by passing a raw instruction. That's what we have in this video. Thank you for watching.